Na kwani kila mtu akiitwa wakili wao nafikiri tu ni wakili? Mimi ni wakili wako.
Hapana, huwezi kwa.
Kuna mahali nimekusimamia kwa wakili.
Hapana, huwezi kusimamia.
Kuna mahali nilikuitisha pesa.
Hapana.
Na sasa mimi unaniuliza nini? Ulikuwako ni kiwarakai?
Si ndio?
Ulikuwa ni kiwarakai?
Sio ulikuja hapa kama wakili yake.
Mimi.
Na ulikuwa umekula pesa yake, si ndio?
Mimi.
Yes, ndio.
Msee nikieleza hii mahakama unaongea mambo ya urongo na hata uchielewi vile unaongea. Nitakuwa nasema
nani ajielewi?
Uchielewi?
Between me and you, nani ajielewi?
You're
just a confused human being.
Kikohozi cha muda wowote, kutokwa na jasho kwa wingi usiku, uchungu kwenye kifua, afya kudhoofika, tafuta matibabu.
Eat.
I'm coming. Nisaidie tu na hizo 70 hours zingine, alafu mimi ndakuwa nimekusort. Don.
Hatuwezi pea mtu loan kama hana garanta.
This is business.
Buda, unajiingizaje kwa mess kama hiyo?
Tibiwa ishi poa. Wanakujua ni kukulenga tu.
Yule karawa ambao tulienda na yeye aliniambia ukienda ukubali ukisi. Mimi sijaishikwa. Mimi ni mtoto wa pastor, kwa hivyo ni mtu mmeloko kwa kanisa sana. Kwa hivyo sijaishikwa. Nikaambiwa kwamba ukienda ukubali hii kesi utapatiwa kazi ya kufagia hapo na hiyo story ishe. Na kama ukikataa utapelekwa committee remand.
Okay.
But that pastor T committee ilikuwa noma. Magistrate ambao alikuwa na preside over the whatever my case alitoa specs hivi akaniuliza umesikia vile nimekuuliza? Kama mimi nimesikia. Akaandika akaniambia unajua kwamba ukipatikana na hatia ukipatikana na hatia hii kesi itakunyonga. Ndio sasa nilistuka na nikajua kwamba niko kwa shida. Judgment ikasomwa ikasemekana kwamba baada ya kuangalia ushahidi umepatikana na hatia na koti imekunyonga, alafu akakunja karabu.
Sio vile inafaa, najihisi nimechoka. Nitabaki kujijutia kwa madhila na dharau pia, na kukubali kutiania, fanya kwa ajili ya jania.
Moja katika amana ambazo Mtume Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam alitusisitizia tuhifadhi ni amana ya kuweka siri.
Kwamba Uislamu umechukua jambo la siri kwamba ni jambo muhimu na ni katika ibada, na yeyote ambaye kwamba atakuwa mwenye kufanya kutoa siri basi amefanya khiana.
Alhamdulillah, no matter what comes my way. Alhamdulillah, my heart will thank and praise, and every time I feel it down.
Well, good afternoon. This is Budget Day. We're talking about a budget that is going to influence your earnings and your spending for the next financial year, 2024-2025. It is the largest budget yet at 4 trillion shillings. The big question is, how does the government intend to finance this particular budget, and what will be the ripple effect? So today we are unpacking that for you. And I'm Regina Manyara, and our team is spread across the country to bring you blow by blow the accounts of the budget 2024-2025. This is Lunchtime News on KBC Channel 1. Now, the government says this year's budget will focus on domestic resource mobilization policies to support the budget. National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Professor Njuguna Ndung'u says Kenya can no longer afford more debts and there is need to raise taxes to drive development.
What is going on at the moment is to ensure the statement that the CS will deliver at the National Assembly or at Parliament is finalized to the best of our abilities and with his guidance. So
is only there to take note. We don't participate in giving contributions. We only take notes and provide guidance within the fiscal framework. So those bidding for resources goes on, and it's a 2-month process, October, November. By November, we now have a consolidation of what has come on. And we now begin to prepare a budget policy statement, draft. This is a draft that, when it is ready, needs to be subjected to public consultation. So we do what is called public hearings. So you've had us, we call the public and we say, here is the budget policy statement, which has the medium-term framework of how we want to do our revenue, raise our revenues and do also expenditure. How much we are going to borrow, all those.
We want more revenues to spend. But how do we raise more revenue to spend? It's either through taxes or debt. The second problem, you have a limitation with how much debt you can carry, isn't it? The third one is that since taxes is the only one that is left now in that space, how much taxes can you raise? We also have resistance in terms of taxes. So what we are trying to do, and to answer your question, is that we are moving in a direction where we want to make sure that we have domestic resource mobilization that is amenable to the development space that we want. And we want to make sure that we remit our tax expenditure to build up a revenue base or a tax base, and also reorganize. We are trying to reform all dimensions of taxes to try and see how we can raise revenue. There's nothing like closing up or relocating. This is a political agenda. Let me tell you, everywhere you go, we try to balance out policies so that nobody feels disadvantaged. Okay? That is a hearsay that you're talking about. Let me tell you, there is nowhere in Kenya that you have raised taxes to the point where farms can close down. Give me an example. I've been living in this country. I've done most of the policy work in my own individual capacity, and I can tell you I have all those.
Treasury buildings, and now we have Alan Aoko and Trevor Ngendo, who've been keeping tabs on what is happening at the building that all eyes are at. Looking at 2 o'clock, we expect to have the CS National Treasury move from Treasury buildings all the way to Parliament to make that particular presentation. I'm joined by Trevor and Alan. Alan, you go first to bring us up to speed with what is happening at Treasury buildings. Good afternoon.
For another day, but there is
this afternoon, what is happening at Treasury buildings?
Today is the D-Day following the public announcement that the budget statement will be read today at 3 p.m. at the National Assembly by CS National Treasury Professor Njuguna. We are here since 7 a.m., mark you, just to understand the inner workings of this budget-making process. We began by touring the office in 12th floor of this very building that houses the macro and fiscal department of the National Treasury, which is headed by Director Musa Kadenje, who showed us the details that go into making the budget statement. We were privy to understand that stakeholders pitch camp here, imagine, for 12 months just proofreading the budget statement and making sure the zeros are zeros and the ones are ones in departments here in the National Treasury. After that, we went to Dr. Chris Kipto, who is the PS Treasury, and he told us that the issue of budgeting is not just a one-day affair. It is a very serious process where the stakeholders have consolidated their their statements, the private sector, the public sector, and now it's a matter of balancing this document. What was interesting to note was how coordinated this thing happens in this building. Dr. Chris Kipto just telling us that Kenyans ought to now just hang it tight. The budget is not something that is just done in one wave of the wand, and therefore he told us that the issue of the 3.299 trillion shilling budget is something that is taken very serious. He was talking about the issue of raising revenue internally, the issue of expenditure and revenue, and remember the revenue side is the one that is most famous because it deals with the finance bill, and the expenditure side deals with the appropriations bill. But on the side of the finance bill, he says whether it goes into parliament and the proposals that they had before do not go as they want, they will just find a way to make sure that the deficit that is going to be thereof is going to be sorted in one way or the other, but that we need to tighten our belts further, and we need to find a way of trimming ourselves into what we are able to afford. And then after that, we did get the opportunity of speaking to Professor himself in his office just as we finished with Dr. Chris Kipto. He called us in and gave a very nice presser on the go, on the fly, just to give us an update on what goes through his mind when preparing for this statement. And he told us about how they are trying to balance this budget to make sure, because everyone wants a bit of more money, but there's nowhere else, he says in his words, that we can get this money except from fiscal consolidation and tightening our belts. But right now, as we speak, there is nothing happening where we are, except that there is maybe a closed door meeting going on now, because right now it is about 10 minutes past 1, and we are looking at the timeline moving very quickly. But I think it's only fair for me to hand over to my colleague Trevor Ngendo, who is outside this building at the ground floor, just to give you a feel of what's happening outside this building as we wind up here inside the Treasury building. Trevor, back to you.
They're saying that this will be actually of huge concern as it stands, because
very good afternoon. Thank you, Alan. And from the 13th floor of the National Treasury building to the ground outside here, where the Cabinet Secretary, Professor Njuguna Ndung'u, is expected to come and do the ceremonial briefcase lift here just outside this entrance here. The Cabinet Secretary, Professor Njuguna Ndung'u, is expected to come here. In the morning, this was a place flurry of activities since the break of dawn. And as the day continues, since up to midday, we've seen activities change and heightened. We've seen security heightened at the moment, and even the choir is right outside here. They've started the introduction from the choir. Normally, this is a day anticipated with a lot of activities are happening. The security has also been beefed up, and any moment this afternoon, we expect the Cabinet Secretary to come here and do the ceremonial lifting of the briefcase, which is one of the most iconic moments on a national budget day, where the Cabinet Secretary steps out of his office with a briefcase in his hand and poses for the cameras. This actually is a system borrowed from the British system, symbolizing the formal presentation of the budget to the nation. And the briefcase itself is usually a leather-bound case containing the budget speech and key documents, including how the budget will be financed. Later on, we expect that the Cabinet Secretary will be headed to the National Assembly, where Professor Njuguna Ndung'u will do his speech detailing the government's plans for the next financial year. Here he outlines the budget, the total budget, which is currently at 4 billion shillings, and the Cabinet Secretary will be proceeding there later on in the afternoon. So at the moment, what we're waiting is the Cabinet Secretary to come down from the 13th floor, his office, where Alan, my colleague, is, and then he'll be here, and then there'll be that ceremonial briefcase lift, the briefcase containing some of the key documents, including even the budget statement. So that is what we can update for now. We'll also be seeing what the Cabinet Secretary, we're looking forward to see what the Cabinet Secretary will be unveiling at the National Assembly. For now, what we have is the draft budget estimates, currently at 4.006 trillion shillings, with a deficit of about 606 billion shillings. So I want to hand it over back to Regina Manyara, but as you can see, the events, the activities here have been heightened. It's a flurry of activities. The choir is right outside here, an indication, a good indication. It's an entertainment to some of the Wananchi who have also gathered here, as well as members of the press, as we await that special moment, the iconic moment where the Cabinet Secretary will come down and do the ceremonial lift of the leather briefcase. For now, I want to hand it over back to you, Regina, in studio.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. Alan and Trevor have been keeping tabs on activities at the Treasury buildings there. The man of the moment being National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Professor Njuguna Ndung'u, who's already pronounced himself that government is either going to focus how to finance this particular budget, 4 trillion. It's either through taxes and the deficit is through borrowing. The question is, do we have enough wiggle room for debt? And that conversation is going to be had with myself here and our guest this afternoon in studio. That is none other than Ruth Kendagor, who is the head of research, Institute of Public Finance there. And those are some of the issues we are going to be trying to unpack as we proceed with the analysis of the budget 2024-2025. But taking a little breather away from matters budget, as you can see there, as it is that the executive is one of the main that is going to be picking at least the lion's share of this particular budget at 2.24 trillion shillings. That is going to be shared out as recurrent allocation of 1.5 trillion shillings and development expenditure at 724.4 billion shillings. That's just but a sneak peek. We can see consolidated funds there at 1.2 trillion shillings. This is a kitty that also goes to debt repayment as well as payment of some salaries there. Says that Kenya cannot afford more borrowing, or rather more debt. As you can see, we already have a budget of 606 billion shillings, where government is going to be looking at domestic borrowing at 300 billion shillings and the rest at 306 billion at external borrowing. And this has put a lot of questions and a lot of pressure on Kenya's debt situation, given we have been having a ballooning public debt that has led to a growing conversation on how do we calculate debt. Is it as a percentage to GDP, and how going forward we need to work on. These are some of the issues we're going to be highlighting in our candid conversation this afternoon. Some of the top gainers, as expected through the draft, we have education taking the lion's share at 700 billion shillings, National Treasury 373.5 billion shillings, roads and infrastructure at 178 billion shillings, and health taking up 128.7 billion shillings. Beginning of the year, we were treated to quite the uncertainty around the health sector, given that even we are having clinical officers who are still over 70 days into their industrial action. They're just demanding to have their interns on permanent and pensionable terms. So we'll be looking to see if this particular budgetary allocation is going to suit those particular sectors with the projects as well as the wage bill they're coming into question. That's just but a sneak peek. We also welcome your feedback. You can get us. Now, we move away from matters budget just a bit, but we'll be back since it's budget day, where professionals from Nyanza have been urged to stand up and be counted in the journey towards creating sustainable economic development and prosperity in the region. Now, speaking during the stakeholder meeting with doctors and health professionals from Nyanza in preparation for the Nyanza International Investment Conference, Information, Communication and the Digital Economy Cabinet Secretary Eliud Owalo said the move will unpack the existing and potential development challenges and turn them into investable opportunities for the investors. He also urged professionals to leverage their diverse knowledge and experiences to sensitize others about the available opportunities that can be tapped in the region.
As opposed to leaving everything in the hands of the national government and the county government, there are also certain valuable interventions we can make as professionals, leveraging on our networks, wide networks, to bring in private sector investors to tap into some of those development opportunities. And that is why we are reaching out to all integral stakeholder segments as we get to the home stretch of this conference, so that nobody is left behind. None of us, starting with yours truly, has exclusivity of ideas. We want to work together with all the stakeholders. We have already had a meeting with the EU, European Union ambassadors, about 30 of them, and they are promised to bring investors to the conference.
On to health, the government says it will use diagnostic labs for continuous screening of diseases through partnerships and collaboration with private sector health well-wishers, donors and providers. According to Public Health and Professional Standards Principal Secretary Mary Muthoni, the move seeks to make health accessible and affordable for citizens regardless of their geographical locations, health condition and financial muscle.
Inauguration of a Metropolis Kenya Reference Laboratory in Nairobi, PS Muthoni underscored the strides made in notifying the public on regular checkups.
I wish to reaffirm the state departments and the ministry's commitment to working with the diagnostic labs across the country to create a reliable, robust and resilient diagnostic network that will improve the quality of healthcare in the country. At the ministry, we are working and striving towards offering available, accessible and affordable quality healthcare.
Earlier on the day, the Principal Secretary, while attending a Kenya Sanitation Alliance meeting, called upon the public to embrace the use of toilets instead of open defecation to reduce waterborne diseases in the rural areas.
As more counties come on board, we should count more companies reflecting the same. Can we have a company for a county that has committed to the same, to some amount of money that is being put for sanitation?
Is that now more than 18 counties with high rates of open defecation have been notified on the need to use toilets, and the initiative is far bearing fruits. Parsai Frederick, Lunchtime News.
The People's Coalition of Civil Action from South Sudan is appealing to the regional and international community to support people of South Sudan in their search for peace, stability and democracy. The group says the Tumaini initiative process that seeks to bring constitutional change presents a golden opportunity to rescue the region from collapse and disintegration. They pledge to lobby for continued negotiation to usher South Sudan into a new dawn of peace, good governance and prosperity.
I kindly ask the media house that are here. This is very important. We are going to get there. We need a fair and credible election as opposition in principle. But the situation and condition at this particular time, and even in the next year or so, will not be in South Sudan.
The issue of political will is addressed within that framework because, A, you don't want to let down the person that you ask because they are going to tell you the honest truth, that this is how I think you should solve this problem and here are the remedies to the problem. So we believe that President Kiir means genuinely in his heart.
We will get our constitutional experts to work with the people to develop a constitutional text that may be debated and adopted in an inclusive constitutional conference, and that then should be taken back to our country for a referendum.
And we need that South Sudan also join the process of
building stability, peace, and stable political systems, so that we can now refocus our energy in rebuilding our broken lives and in creating wealth. South Sudan is endowed with huge potential.
Absa Bank Kenya PLC, in partnership with the International Trade Center, have rolled out an initiative that seeks to provide women with market information and access, coaching and mentorship and business networks, as well as capital to scale up their businesses. Absa Bank Business Director Elizabeth Wasuna says the program will focus on training women on financial literacy and entrepreneurship. The initiative comes ahead of the leaders' upcoming Absa Inspire Me conference, bringing together over 10,000 women entrepreneurs from across Africa.
We've committed to say that we are walking the journey with SMEs, from the startups all the way to the big companies. We are then saying that we're providing them with programs both on a financial basis and a non-financial basis. Is it something that happens overnight? Absolutely not. It is a journey.
Africa is waking up, and Africa is realizing these boundaries are not really serving us when it comes especially to business. And so the Kenyan market is great, but even greater is the East African market. And even greater is the 1.4 billion market that is Africa Free Trade.
The National Public Benefits Organization Consortium now wants the transition of the PBO Act to be done at the Planning and Devolution Department and not at the Ministry of Interior. The civil society group says their work lies under the social realm but not criminal activities. The group now threatens to use legal means to push for the transfer of the implementation of the Act from the Interior docket to Planning and Devolution Department.
The continued staying of the PBOs under the Ministry of Interior, instead of giving us an enabling environment, it is giving a chilling environment. Because all of us know, according to the Constitution, the principles of national security is to protect the country from internal and external threats. So by placing the PBOs to the Ministry of Interior, it amounts to saying that we as PBOs are a threat to the security of this country, which we are not. And that's why we are saying that an executive order of a president can only be revoked by another executive order. And that's why yesterday we presented a petition as required by law under Article 37 to the Office of the President, asking the President to reconsider issuing another executive order to revoke the one that placed the PBOs in the Interior Ministry.
Tuna imani kwamba president wetu ako na mikakati ya kuhakikisha kwamba PBO Act inakuwa ndio the legal guide ya kuhakikisha kwamba Kenya inakuwa transformed. So we have all the confidence, and we know kuna makosa ilifanywa na the former president with respect to the PBO Act kuiweka kwa Ministry ya Interior. Na sababu gani tunasema tunataka iondolewe? Ni kwa sababu we are not a terrorist group. The PBO Act inafanya public benefit organizations zinakuwa a key stakeholder in development and sustainable development for that matter in the country.
NPC. Livestock farmers in 9 counties are set to benefit from a 37 billion shillings co-investment program between United States Agency for International Development, USAID. Feed the Future coordinator Andrew McCown says that the cash support will target to strengthen the livestock market and increase quality of livestock products.
There have been calls for the government and development partners to co-invest in the livestock subsector to de-risk the subsector and strengthen the northern Kenyan counties' economy. USAID says there's need for targeted intervention, especially in market leakages, to ensure farmers get market for their produce.
We remain a strong partner with the government of Kenya and the private sector, and through that collaboration we have facilitated improved production, aggregation, market system strengthening and development.
USAID says it is targeting to roll out a 37 billion shillings co-investment program to develop the livestock value chain in 9 northern Kenya counties.
To guide resource allocation to strategic areas identified by this plan that can help elevate Kenya from lower middle income country status and increase its resilience.
Part of the financing will go towards increasing quality of livestock and products to make Kenyan products competitive in key export markets.
USAID has established a 6 billion shilling Impact for Northern Kenya fund, known as the INC Fund, through our USAID Kuza activity that supports the growth of businesses and livestock producing areas.
For coordinated support, livestock keepers have been encouraged to start cooperative society for aggregation and enjoy economies of scale. Benson Rioba reporting for Lunchtime News.
It's a budget day, and we're looking at that particular fiscal policy for 2024-2025 that is going to determine what you earn and how it's going to help you in as far as matters of development is concerned. We take a quick breather, but we'll be back. It is budget day.
Kikohozi cha muda wowote, kutokwa na jasho kwa wingi usiku, uchungu kwenye kifua, afya kudhoofika, tafuta matibabu. Labda ni TB ni ugonjwa wa kweli. Ukipimwa matibabu yapo utapona. Daktari kumshauri tumia dawa kwa nidhamu. Elimu tupashane tupige vita TB. Mwa TB waishi poa. Mwa TB waishi poa.
Unajua, token mita yako inahitaji system update. Ni rahisi na ni free. Ukipata ujumbe kutoka Kenya Power, yani SMS, weka kodi ya kwanza kureset, alafu weke kodi ya pili kuupdate.
Nilikutengenezea kitu.
From different worlds, come a trio with a shared destiny.
Ikulinde na ikuongoze.
Where will the fashion runway take them?
Mimi nitachunga maua yetu vizuri sana hadi wewe narudi.
Family businesses, everything.
The beauty and the beats. Shanga, Monday to Friday at 8 p.m. on Maisha Magic Plus.
Good afternoon, welcome back. It is indeed a budget day, and right here on KBC Channel 1, we are unpacking that for you to help you understand how it's going to affect your life for the next 12 months at least. Now, before we speak and get to the nitty-gritty details, remember we have a guest in studio who is going to be helping us understand what the budget really means for Kenyans at large, especially now with the question of Kenya's debt situation. Let's look at those stories that are making headlines, where the government has been urged to ensure that primary and secondary schools have provisions for psychosocial support for learners to ensure holistic development and guarantee improved learning outcomes. Psychologists are also calling on parents and guardians to pay attention to their children's mental well-being.
Child will be marked on the 16th of June under the theme, Education for All Children in Africa, the time is now. Ahead of the celebrations, it is emerging that despite focus on educating the African child, their mental well-being is often neglected.
Children have just gone back to school after the floods. Who are these children who came to school? Are the schools ready? Were the teachers ready for the kind of traumatic experiences that the children have gone through? Did we, create an environment where the children now can come and talk about what happened to them? We know most universities, or if not all, have fully fledged counseling services. But the question is, who takes care of the primary kids and who is taking care of the secondary school?
We have seen in areas where we have got slum fires, even where we have dysfunctional families, where we have got domestic violence issues where parents are fighting. All these kind of issues affect children, and their performance, of course, drops in their classrooms there.
With children having different capabilities, the government is being urged to ensure the syllabus is aligned to their various strengths. Meanwhile, guardians have been challenged to evaluate content children consume on the digital space to protect them from the rise in cases of cyberbullying and online sexual exploitation.
Once we're introducing our children to technology, we take the necessary steps to keep them safe online, depending on their maturity level. So for younger children, probably below the age of 8 to 10 years, you can use the parental apps to restrict what they access. For the preteens and the teenagers, of course, they will be able to bypass the parental apps. So have you created a room where there is open conversations, where this child knows these are the threats I'm likely to face online, this is where I can report abuse, and this is what I should do in case I feel threatened on the online platform.
Nancy Okware, Lunchtime News.
To the counties, the campaign of saving the boy child from yokes of drugs has gained momentum after 65 reformed drug addicts from the coastal counties graduated after a 6-month rehabilitation program. Speaking after witnessing the exercise, the spouse of the Deputy President, Pastor Dorcas Rigathi, said her office will continue helping and nurturing the boy child in a move she says will save the future generation and prepare them to be responsible citizens. Details of this in our County News Roundup.
The reformed addicts were identified when Pastor Dorcas toured Shimamzi drug dens in Mombasa before she organized a medical camp at the Railways Dispensary in Miritini late last year. Many of the addicts have lost hope of ever regaining their well-being after being addicted to drugs for years.
Lakini kama baba wote wako ndani ya jera, wengine wamevunjika mifupa, ndio hao wako kwa ward za bodaboda, wengine wako huko chumba za marehemu na wako kwa kaburi. Tunaachiwa manyumba ambayo ni kina mama, they are the heads and they are the leaders. That is not the right way. It is not the divine order.
Elsewhere, girls from public schools within Makueni County have benefited from sanitary towels courtesy of Makueni Women Representative Rose Museo.
Kila mtoto amekadiriwa kupata paketi 8 ambazo zitakuwa zinamsaidia ili kuhakikisha kwamba hakuna mtoto anafaa kukosa kuja shule kwa sababu ya wakati huo wa hedhi.
Meanwhile, a Mombasa businessman Mohammed Mathubuti has written a letter to the Independent Policing Oversight Authority seeking for investigations into alleged interference by senior police officers over ownership dispute on a prime property.
Mimi kama the proprietor of the property nimekuwa illegally evicted from the property. Wakanichukua, wakaenda, wakani intimidate na wakachukua goons wakawatia ndani ya property yetu ile pale.
In Machakos County, Governor Wavinya Ndeti has warned environmental polluters to stop the vice or face the wrath of the law.
Yule amepatiwa hii kazi ya kusafisha. Wewe mkienda mko na supervisor, wale watafanya kazi vizuri. Si wadanganyi, hao ndio nitawaandika na niwaandike permanent.
In the meantime, residents from Nari area in Buri constituency, Meru County, held peaceful demonstrations of a poor state of road, joining Nari Market and Karichene junction of Meru Nanyuki Highway.
Sababu hata watu wa pikipiki wanapata challenge kubwa sana kubeba kwa njia, ukiangalia chini ni mawe tu. Gari ya bakando ukuza uwezi ingia ibeba mabakando.
And finally, concern has been raised over alarming number of patients diagnosed with 3 types, cervical, esophagus and breast cancer in Busia County. Statistics from oncology department in the county shows that a total of 10 to 16 patients in the county have been affected.
Nataka kuhimiza tukuwe na watu wengine wengi ambao wanaweza kuleta hii matibabu karibu na watu. We have got a clinic here in Busia County Referral Hospital, which is headed by one of our clinicians that has undertaken training in oncology.
Agriculture Cabinet Secretary Mithika Linturi has revealed that the government is in the final stages of operationalizing Mogoka Mira regulations of 2023. Linturi says the regulations will guide on how the stimulant will be traded, including licensing and designated areas of sale.
As the debate on the sale and use of Mogoka rages on, Agriculture Cabinet Secretary Mithika Linturi says the government is working round the clock to solve the stalemate through proper regulations. Linturi has revealed that the government, through his ministry, will soon gazette Mira and Mogoka pricing committees to regulate the sale of the crop across the counties.
Probably by end of week, I will be gazetting the Mogoka and the Mira pricing committee, because the issue of the problem, people are talking about the pricing because it's cheap and is being accessed by many children. I want now to have a committee as provided in the regulations for them to be able to sit down and be able to give guidelines on how Mogoka will be sold or in terms of pricing.
Speaking in Runyenjes, Embu County, the CS assured Mogoka farmers and traders that the government will be addressing all issues, including the levies imposed on Mogoka by coastal counties.
Other than the very unreasonable levies being imposed on Mogoka by the various county bills, financing bills, there is no other cause of alarm.
The CS also met farmers at Rokuriri Tea Factory, where he stated that the government has put in place measures to increase milk production from the current 5 billion litres to 11 billion per year by 2027.
So hiyo sex semen tutauza na 2,900 ili mkulima aweze kupata mbegu sawasawa tunaielewa, na ili yule mtoto ataweza kuzaliwa awe ni ndama ambaye inaweza kutupea maziwa sawasawa.
Nancy Okware, Lunchtime News.
Now to sports, where Ochre Swimming Club triumphed in the 4th round of the Peak Age Group Swimming Championship, which ended last evening with a total of 57 medals. The championship, held at Consolata School, Nairobi, attracted more than 700 junior swimmers from schools and clubs within Nairobi County.
Orca Swim Club was crowned overall champions after garnering more than 450 points ahead of Aga Khan Academy and St. Hannah's School, who finished 2nd and 3rd respectively. Courtney Mwiruri won the girls 6 years and under category ahead of Lisa Njeri and Maloba Kavai, who finished 2nd and 3rd respectively. Stephanie Wambui took charge of the girls 13 to 14 years freestyle event ahead of Kihungi Mudhoni and Chloe Malens, who were the other swimmers on the podium. Baraka Chacha emerged victorious in the boys 13 to 14 years butterfly category in a time of 15.42 seconds ahead of Brian Obuna and Abbas Nurdin, who completed the podium. Oka Swim Club finished first in the medal count with a total of 57 medals, while Strathmore School finished 2nd with 24 medals and Consolata School took 3rd position with 14 medals. After the 4th round of the championship, focus shifts to the 5th round slated for 6th July at All Saints Cathedral School in Nairobi.
Boston Celtics stars Jason Tatum and Jailel Brown helped their team to beat Dallas Mavericks and take a stronghold lead of the 3-0 on the NBA Finals. Tatum scored 31 points and Brown 30 as the Celtics won 106-99 in a game of 3 at the NBA Finals. The Mavericks reduced their deficit from 97-70 early in the 4th quarter but failed to turn things around into a victory. Kyrie Irving scored 35 points for Dallas, while Luka Doncic finished with 27 points, 6 rebounds and 6 assists. Boston Celtics, who currently have a record of 17 titles, are on a 1 win away from an 18th NBA title and a first since 2008. The next match for the finals will be on Saturday.
Drew Holiday on the drive, kicks it back out. White puts up a three. Bang! Derek White from Irving inside, Lively all alone, throws it down. Two drives, pulls up, jump shot, puts it in. Jaylen Brown now.
Well, that puts a cap on matters news this budget day, and we get back to matters budget, given that this is the largest budget yet at 4 trillion shillings. And these are just some of the few statistics that we have so far. Looking at the budget, it is capped as per the draft at 4 trillion shillings. The national government is going to be the largest shareholder, so to speak, with the executive taking up 2.24 trillion shillings, which is constitute of recurrent allocation at 1.5 trillion shillings, while development expenditure is earmarked for 724.4 billion shillings. Out of that particular budget is that the Kenya Revenue Authority is going to be drawing, or rather expected to raise 3.3 trillion shillings, and the consolidated fund service that is actually a kitty used to pay debt as well as some salaries there is earmarked 1.2 trillion shillings. There, we already mentioned that revenue collection target is at 3.3 trillion shillings. In an earlier interview there with Professor Njuguna Ndungu, the man of the moment, CS National Treasury, he said government can only raise monies through taxes or borrowing, especially with the debt now. We had a debt deficit of 606 billion shillings, and it intends to raise it by borrowing from the domestic market a cool 300 billion shillings and externally 306 billion shillings. This is definitely eliciting quite some debate, and we're going to be unpacking that with our guest this afternoon, who is Ruth Kendakor, Head of Research at the Institute of Public Finance. Top gainers, according to that particular draft, as seen and perused by us, indicate that the education sector will be taking up the lion's share as far as sector budgetary allocation at 700 billion shillings. National Treasury coming in second at 373 billion shillings, 0.5. Road and infrastructure, there are 178 billion shillings, with the health sector taking up 128.7 billion shillings. That's just but a sneak peek of what is contained in the budget that is expected to be read, presented, if you like, this afternoon at Parliament buildings for the bicameral Parliament there. And what is unique about the budget 2024-2025 is that after the committee was done with this particular proposal of the National Committee, they presented it on 13th May, and soon we proceeded to have a public participation on the proposed Finance Bill 2024-2025. We'll get back to the details after this particular break.
Yule karawa ambao tulienda na yeye aliniambia ukienda ukubali ukisi. Mimi sijaishikwa. Mimi ni mtoto wa pasta, kwa hivyo ni mtu mmeleo kwa kanisa sana. Kwa hivyo sijaishikwa. Nikamwambia kwamba ukienda ukubali hii kesi utapatiwa kazi ya kufagia hapo na hiyo story ishe. Na kama ukikataa utapelekwa committee remand.
Okay.
But that Pastor T committee ilikuwa noma. Magistrate ambao alikuwa na preside over the whatever my case alitoa specs hivi, akaniuliza umesikia vile nimekuuliza? Kama mimi nimesikia. Akaandika akaniambia unajua kwamba ukipatikana na hatia hii kesi itakunyonga. Ndio sasa nistuka na nikajua kwamba niko kwa shida. judgment ikasomwa, ikasemekana kwamba baada ya kuangalia ushahidi umepatikana hatia na koti imekunyonga, alafu akakunja karabu.
Sio vile inafaa, najihisi nimechoka. Nitabaki kujijutia kwa madhila na dharau pia, na kukubali kutiania, fanya kwa ajili ya jalia.
Moja katika amana ambazo Mtume Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam alitusisitizia tuhifadhi ni amana ya kuweka siri.
Kwamba Uislamu umechukua jambo la siri kwamba ni jambo muhimu na ni katika ibada, na yeyote ambaye kwamba atakuwa mwenye kufanya kutoa siri basi amefanya khiana. Alhamdulillah, no matter what comes my way. Alhamdulillah, my heart won't fake and praise, and every time I feel it down.
What would you suggest, like the best occasion to make this?
The best thing about this, it doesn't require an occasion. This is a very light meal that you can make when your friend is coming over or you've had a very long day and you need something quick to make. This is your go-to meal. Okay, I'll do that. Let me just make sure it's well coated. Then we're going to dip it into the hot oil. Okay.
Good afternoon once again. Matters of the budget take center stage, and we want to take you to the building there that we are all focused on this afternoon, where we are joined by two of our very own business reporters. We have Trevor Ngendo as well as Alan Aoko. The pictures that you're seeing are at the iconic stairs, the stairs that get a moment at least every once a year at a time, like now, to be featured across the country and also across the East African regional bloc. Remember that we also have our budgets across the EAC read at the same time. So those are the iconic steps there, where we're expecting any time from now, backed by Treasury officials as well as government officials, including PS National Treasury there, Chris Kipto. We're expecting National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Professor Njuguna Ndongo to do that ceremonial, display of the leather briefcase that is going to be literally holding the life of the country in as far as matters of economy is concerned, that is going to give us the direction that the government intends to take when it comes to matters of expenditure. And the big question this afternoon is, with a 4 trillion shillings budget for the financial year 2024-2025, how is it going to affect your life and mine as Wanjiko? We'll be unpacking that, and we have none other than Ruth Kendagor, who is the head of research at the Institute of Public Finance in studio. To help us unpack that, we've been doing an analysis all the way from morning. Now we just want to tighten it up and look at the key areas that are likely to be highlighted this afternoon at Parliament buildings, and we welcome your feedback. Of course, you can get us on our various social media platforms, including on X at KBC Channel 1. Thank you very much, ma'am, for your time.
Thank you very much.
Expectations of the budget. Let's speak from there. Since we're asking our audience what they are expecting from this particular budget, from where you sit, what are your expectations?
Thank you very much for having me on this session today. Looking at the 2024-2025 budget that has been presented by the National Treasury and discussed by the Budget Committee in Parliament, I think the first question that comes top of my mind, and that is what lingers even as I flip through the numbers, is, will this budget hold? Will this budget hold? Experience has shown us that whereas we have the budget approved at the beginning of the financial year, we have revisions that come in at the middle of the financial year, towards the end of the financial year. That changes the numbers. And so the extent to which we can bank on these numbers to inform planning, to inform expectations, is something that we need to look into. For instance, what do we expect having this budget passed now? What trend will we see in supplementary budget 1? What trend will we see in supplementary budget 2? And so can we really bank on these numbers? Will the expenditure
maintain at the levels that is given now? Will the revenue that has been targeted to finance this expenditure hold? Will we be able to raise that money? And if we don't raise that money as much as it is expected or anticipated, as has been seen in the past, what does it mean for our fiscal consolidation? What does it mean for our fiscal deficit? This year we are looking at an ambitious fiscal deficit, cutting down by close to 50% from where we were last year. Is that a realistic number? Will we be able to really get to that level of revenue generation so that we cut down our fiscal deficit by half? That is the top question on my mind as I look at the budget.
So what I hear is 4 trillion is quite ambitious.
4 trillion.
3.3 trillion shillings in terms of revenue and allocation is looking not so tenable. Why do you think it is? Because we've had during this public participation in the finance bill 2024-2025 quite the private sector has really come out to state that some of these policies, or rather draft changes in the taxation policy, are not going to affect them in the positive, a majority of them. So why do you think it's not tenable? 3.3.
Well, looking at the revenue, I think a couple of issues come top of mind that I think we need as citizens to look at, and as policymakers need to take a look at this. The revenue of 3.3 is going to be raised from taxes, and we also have the appropriation in aid. Starting from the ordinary revenue, over the past, we have not been meeting our revenue targets, except maybe for the post-COVID period where the economy was shocking back after the adjustment that had been made on the tax policy for to cover the COVID shock. But since then, the nominal numbers have been going up in revenue, yes, but in terms of meeting the targets, we have not really been able to achieve that. And so we are still very far from the target that has been set, for countries like Kenya of around 25% revenue in GDP. We are pretty very far away from that.
But then also, just before we get to that, but then we have seen the taxman employ a few, strategies to ensure that it rakes in more revenue. One of the suggestions, and I just want to get it and read it as it is, there's a proposal to actually increase more powers to KRA, that it can actually compel an individual, yes, to synergize with their e-teams. That currently isn't. It is basically voluntary. But now with this particular proposal, it is going to be almost compulsory that a KRA can actually do that as one of the strategies. Do you think that these strategies actually are going to rake in, or rather, bring impetus to the taxman as tries to hit its target?
Well, looking at the strategies that have been put in place to raise the tax revenue, I think I would suggest we take a step back to look at what this means in terms of revenue generation. When we are imposing taxes as an economy, we are looking at taxes from two perspectives. We would want to introduce new taxes to be able to expand the revenue base and be able to generate more taxes. But we also want to see tax revenue coming out of growth in the economy, because when there's more growth, there's more production, there's more economic activity, then more people are able to pay their taxes. The numbers that we have, the finance bill that we have, has been discussed, and it is anticipated that we will have tax from, revenue from additional taxes to be 3 times higher than the growth in tax from economic growth. We should be targeting the other way around. We should be targeting more revenue from economic growth as opposed to more revenue from higher taxation to, expanding the tax base, introducing new taxes, taxing even more what is already existing. And that is why every sector of the economy is feeling a pinch on the taxes. And we need to look at how taxes can be guided by, driven by expanded growth, as opposed to introducing new taxes to the already overstretched population, already overstretched business entities.
That is also an issue that has been brought up by especially the manufacturers, saying that some of the new taxes that are being imposed are like punitive, because they're either they're duplicating taxes that are already there. So it is a feel that this introduction of additional taxes might actually be a Tobin-Robin kind of experience when it comes to matters of tax, and also how then does that affect Kenya's, state as an investment destination?
Well, indeed, with the revisions and the multiple revisions around the taxation through the finance bill, we've seen especially the private sector, especially the manufacturers, raise quite some voice and say that the taxes are becoming more and more punitive and more hurtful to the economy. Allow me to pick an example of the eco-levy tax that is, meant to look at discouraging production or packaging within certain materials, looking at environmental friendly. That is the ideal concept behind the tax. But we already have the extended producer responsibility in place that was introduced barely 2 years ago. And that, it is still in its formative stage in terms of implementation. The regulations are supposed to be developed. They are not yet out. If they've been developed, they're not yet published, or rather we've not been able to access them. And so before we are even done with implementing one strategy, we have gone to a new one which touches more or less the same principle that was already there. And that is why the producers are feeling this pinch. And one of the things that we as an institute, we think needs to be done is to relook at these strategies. We have the medium-term revenue strategy that was developed, and there's been quite some feedback around it. And I think we need to hold on to what is given in the medium-term revenue strategy and work with that implementation so that we have the strategy now being implemented through the annual finance bill, and it's easier to track the change and even the predictability of the tax system to also inform the business community.
Indeed. Now we'll be getting back to that particular conversation, but we take a quick breather. We have Ruth Kendagor, who is the head of research at the Institute of Public Finance. We're still speaking matters business. We'll be back.
Yule karawa ambao tulienda na yeye aliniambia ukienda ukubali yukisi. Mimi sijaishikwa. Mimi ni mtoto wa pasta, kwa hivyo ni mtu nimeelewa kwa kanisa sana. Kwa hivyo sijaishikwa. Nikamwambia kwamba ukienda ukubali yukisi utapatiwa kazi ya kufagia hapo na hiyo story ishe. Na kama ukikataa utapelekwa committee remand.
Okay.
But that pastor T committee ilikuwa noma. Magistrate ambao alikuwa na preside over the whatever my case alitoa specs hivi akaniuliza umesikia vile nimekuuliza? Kama mimi nimesikia. Akaandika akaniambia unajua kwamba ukipatikana na hatia ukipatikana na hatia hii kesi itakunyonga. Ndio sasa nilistuka na nikajua kwamba niko kwa shida. Judgment ikasomwa. Ikasemekana kwamba baada ya kuangalia ushahidi umepatikana na hatia na koti imekunyonga. Alafu akakunja karabu. Sio vile inafaa. Najisi nimechoka.
Watch the Mozart Bet Cup as teams from both the top tier and lower tier battle for the ultimate prize of representing the country in Africa's CAF Confederations Cup. Catch all the action live and exclusive on KBC Channel 1, beginning with a round of 16 matches, the quarter-final, semi-final and the final. Mozart Bet Cup, live and exclusive on KBC Channel 1, your true sports partner.
Welcome back. It is budget day and we are on hand to bring you live coverage of the budget pegged at 4 trillion shillings. How it's going to impact on you and I in terms of business as well as an individual level. And to take us through this conversation is none other than Ruth Kendagor, who is the head of research at the Institute of Public Finance. The pictures that you're seeing currently are from Treasury building. We have pictures from 12th floor. That is where we have Alan Aoko. He's been keeping tabs on, officials and what they're doing there, and even had an earlier interview with the CS himself, that is Professor Njuguna Ndongo, who was just giving his views on the proposed budget and what was the thinking behind that particular draft there that is expected to shape the economy for the next 12 months there, saying that it's the high time that government worked on a consolidation of spending, so to speak, or rather to prioritize spending and identify key areas such as education, health, roads, to give larger amounts to ensure that developments in this particular sector actually happen. The country, beginning of 2024 this year, has at least undergone through industrial or rather observed industrial action, looking at what is happening also with clinical officers who are already over 70 days into their strike and such. So health is one of the areas that is likely to be the top gainers of this particular budget there. Another issue that has been raised is that the deficit there of 606 billion shillings is actually referred to as quite a reduced deficit there if you compare the last financial year, that is 2023-2024. But then the question is, do we have enough wiggle room to take in up more debt? Statistics indicate that by January 2024, that is the beginning of this year, public debt stood at 2.4 trillion shillings. There was also conversation with the World Bank that Kenya might actually be seeking another note from the World Bank valued at around $1 billion there to try and buy back. Remember, we had an issue with our Eurobond where we raised around 1.5 billion shillings of Eurobond that was due in 2031 at a rate of 9.7% on a coupon rate. Then also the balance of 500 million on 2024 Eurobond was to be settled, or rather is to be settled from a proceeds of $1.2 billion loan from the World Bank. A news coming in is that the World Bank indicates that Kenya is considering another Eurobond buyback in 2024. Can it hold? Do you have enough wiggle room when it comes to matters debt? And how is this going to affect the economy going forward? Some of the areas that we're going to be looking at as we continue with this particular conversation. As you can see, it is exactly 2:03. And from the iconic steps there outside Treasury buildings, well, you can see nothing much has been done, but the carpet is already rolled down. We do not know if Professor Ndongo is going to opt to walk to Parliament, which is just but a few meters away from Treasury buildings, or is going to use his official vehicle. But these are some of the pictures that we're having right now. We have Trevor and Alan who've been keeping tabs on activities at Treasury, and they're going to be bringing us that live feed there. I want to bring you back to the conversation that we were having right here in studio with Ruth Kendall there. We were talking about what has been set aside for what. We have a 4 trillion shillings budget where we intend to raise 3.3 in revenue, where around 441 billion, if I'm not wrong, if my math is not wrong, according to the draft, is coming through a way of appropriation in aid. What's your take on that?
Thank you very much. Yeah, indeed, it is important for us to look at revenue from all angles. Apart from tax revenue, we need to look at the appropriation in aid. It may appear like a smaller component when you're looking at the total revenue, but 404 billion, that's sufficient to finance 2-3 sectors within the economy, combine education, maybe agriculture and another sector. 3 sectors can be financed from that revenue. And so something interesting we're observing in the appropriation in aid is that we see that in the last financial year specifically, a number of the government entities were able to revise their charges upward, the charges for the services that we access. Talk about the Ministry of Interior with the many revisions we saw. We've seen revisions in the Lands Ministry, we've seen revisions in water. We would expect that these revisions in charges would also translate to higher revenue targets that we expect. So these are services that citizens need, and the elasticity is limited. We don't expect that citizens will stop going for services now because the prices have gone up, right? Yeah. But looking at the numbers we have for the targets for the appropriation in aid, they seem to be declining between 2023 and 2024, the 2 financial years. Mm-hmm. And so the question is this a policy coherence issue? We would have expected to see an increase in the appropriation in aid, which provides a little bit of cushion, in terms of overdependence on the tax revenue strategy. But that is something we will be monitoring as we proceed into the financial year to see the changes, especially as we'll be looking at supplementary budgets as they'll be coming in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, still speaking on revenue, we have seen quite the proposals there that are
seemingly Ndungu and Co are looking at, the implementation or the rollout of wealth tax that comes in with the motor vehicle tax and such. But then the question that this particular, some of the proposals under the wealth tax, are we seeing a situation where we might actually have another tax brand introduced? Is there room for such? Because we've been getting a lot of views over the last few days in, during this particular public participation. Are we expecting to see how are they going to play around with the tax band, especially when it comes to PAYE, which is one of the low-hanging fruits when it comes to revenue generation?
Yeah. Something important to note is that whereas we talk about a progressive tax system, and which means that we tax those who have, we tax the higher level and tax less those who earn less. We need to look at the effectiveness of the taxes that the changes that are brought in, year out. Mm-hmm. Last year we had the amendments to the income tax that brought in the new tax bands and the revisions. What impact has that created? Where are we with that so that we can make new propositions, new changes?
I like the question you've posed because we've not been given any report as to how the new tax bands, or rather the new policies that we adopted in the last financial year actually added onto revenue generation. There's none. There's none.
Maybe it didn't work.
Yes.
Or maybe it was the most excellent idea. We don't know. And unless we know that, then these subsequent and consequent year in, year out changes really do not add so much value. And it's the reason why there's so much noise around this legislation. The more information you avail to citizens, the more transparent the process is, the more coherent it is in terms of even citizen engagement and policy insights. And so looking at the wealth taxes as they are coming in, take for example the motor vehicle tax. There are really quite a number of gaps that already exist on that tax. And so you wonder, do we anticipate to see the same case we had with the affordable housing, where there's going to be one court case after the other to pull it down and discuss it again? A simple example would be motor vehicle is not an income. Owning a car is not an income. Why do we place it under an income tax? So those are some of the issues we expect to see.
That we need to actually keep tabs on, what policies are introduced and what impetus they provide going forward. Do they meet the objectives, that is? Unfortunately, even with our Bureau of Statistics there, we've not seen any report that has actually looked into the various changes to the tax policy, if indeed they have met the objectives that they have been laid out for. Yes, we saw changes in that particular earnings bracket, so to speak, in the last financial year. Pardon for that. I mean, I'm having a bit of a cold there, but we're trying to keep it in hand. That was just a brief sneak peek of what is happening at Treasury buildings. Any minute from now, we're going to be bringing you the live feed from there once it stabilizes. We are informed by Alan Aoko, like any minute from now, we're going to have Treasury CS Professor Ndungu actually take that lift all the way down to ground floor, do the ceremonial briefcase display there. So any minute from now, we're going to be joined by Alan and Trevor, who are outside the National Treasury buildings for that particular ceremonial briefcase show. As you can see, everything is set for a good photo op there. There they are. They are setting up for that particular photo op that you can be sure is going to be a splash across various media outlets. It signifies that we are about to hear from Treasury and what it has planned for government expenditure and how it indeed planning to raise those funds there. And because government does not have its own money, so to speak, it has to generate its own monies from you and I, especially when it comes to revenue and the deficit by borrowing. How is it going to affect, especially the domestic borrowing there at 300 billion? How is it going to affect the private sector in as far as access to credit, or rather availability to credit? Looking at the financial sector there, there's been quite an increase in interest rates when it comes to loans and such. Some of the questions that are already streaming in on our various platforms, Kenyans are asking then, what does the budget have in store for them? In a few minutes there, exactly 20 minutes, so if they're going to be keeping time, we're going to be hearing from CS Ndungu over the same. perfect photo op there. We can see the CS, National Treasury, Professor Ndongo, flanked by his PSs there. We have Chris Crypto on the far end, and we're also seeing Dr. Thuge there at the infamous steps of Treasury buildings there, where we have our reporters, Trevor and Alanoko, who've been keeping tabs on that. The budget is earmarked for 4.006 trillion shillings. One of in as far as the lion's share pie sector, we've seen education is likely to get the largest piece of the pie. But also we have 2.24 trillion shillings going to the executive there, being part of recurrent and development expenditure for 724.4 billion shillings, while recurrent carries 1.4 trillion shillings. This is the largest budget yet if you compare it with what we had in the financial year that is lapsing in the next 2 weeks or so. And we've had a series of changes when it comes to the budget policy statement there. We've had supplementary budgets there that either have had allocated additional funds to various sectors. We had an issue with matters of drought earlier in the preceding year, that is in 2022-2023, that affected how government spent the monies then. And in this financial year, 2023-2024, the country has been grappling with the issue of increased rainfall there, and we had to have various sagas and MDAs chipping in and trying to assist government put the matter in check there. So over the last 1 year or so that is lapsing, that's the fiscal year 2023-2024, we've had a series of changes when it comes to matters of the policy in terms of the budget. But now we have a draft that indicates that government intends to spend 4.006 trillion shillings in the next financial year there. Questions abound on, the Tax Procedures Act. Let's have a listen in there. Let's have some sound from Treasury buildings.
Directors only. Pass by. Directors only. The Directors General, Principal Secretary, the Central, and the Commissioner General Carrier remain.
Buildings there. In our subsequent bulletins there, we will be getting to know exactly what we have seen on the screen there, who they were and what indeed they intended with their interruption of that particular ceremonial display at the Treasury buildings steps. Well, we are yet to find out if the CS National Treasury, that is Professor Ndongo, if he's going to be walking to Treasury buildings or if he's going to be using his official vehicle to get to the Parliament buildings there, where he's expected to present that particular draft, budget draft for 2024-2025. We have seen over the last few years various, cabinet secretaries of National Treasury either opting to walk or, using their vehicles there. It's an opportunity for color. Each doing, it's not stipulated as to how the briefcase and the man of the moment is going or is expected to get to Parliament. It is just expected that he arrives at Parliament and gives that much awaited speech presentation of the proposed budget. What is very unique about this particular budget is that after the National Assembly Finance Committee presented this particular Finance Bill 2024-2025 that heavily constitutes on how government intends to raise monies and how it intends to spend these monies that are going to be raised in this financial year. We then proceeded as a country to participate in a public participation to give views from individual capacity at an individual level, even corporates, as to what the proposals have been put across. And it has been quite a mixed bag of beans there. Some proponents saying that it is a draft that is well in line with government's better economic transformation agenda there. And critics coming out to say that it lacks a vital component that is addressing the high cost of living that Kenyans have been grappling with and have been asking the executive to look into, especially looking at the price of fast-moving consumable goods, access to better healthcare, cost to education, as well as creating a conducive business environment, especially for local manufacturers as well. I guess the question is already answered. Professor Ndongo is not going to be taking a walk. Pardon. Ndongo there has gotten into his official vehicle there, and he is going to be in Parliament in the next less than 5 minutes. It's quite... That is Treasury. That indeed is quite the security there, security detail. National Police. That is the vehicle that is ferrying the most important document in the country today. Given the short distance between Treasury buildings and Parliament, we expect that National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Professor Ndongo is going to be in Parliament in 5 or 7 minutes or so. He is going to be presenting that particular document to the bicameral house there. We've had our reporters Gladys Mungai there and Abdiaziz Ashim who are on standby to just bring us up to speed immediately it gets there. And earlier on, we also sampled some of the views that leaders had ahead of this particular presentation. And it is quite a mixed reaction to the budget, given that the draft Finance Bill 2024 was already made public. And they have chimed in. And what is clear is that also leaders want this particular budget to put into consideration the needs and wants of the general public, especially in matters of cost of living. We will be playing back that particular take from various leaders as we await for the arrival of the National Treasury Cabinet Secretary, Professor Ndongo, who any minute from now should be making his way to Parliament buildings under tight security there, a mix of National Intelligence Service as well as National Police, the men in blue there, providing that extra security all the way from National Treasury buildings to Parliament. According to Parliament documents, it indicates at exactly 2:30, the House will be seated waiting for the budget reading. This cuts across the East Africa region. Around the same time, the East African community is also going to be presenting they'll be talking about Uganda and Tanzania, are also going to have their budgets read. So we will be comparing that. But now let's take a quick breather. But remember, it is budget day and we're on hand to bring you up to speed
with everything that is transpiring. A quick breather, we'll be right back.
Wakati huo nilifikiria siwezi kushindwa. Ningeendesha boda kwa kasi, kukwepa na kuvuka barabara ovyo ovyo. Ningefanya chochote ili kufika napokwenda haraka. Lakini siku moja